Hello and welcome to study session for AP Physics 1. Today's episode will be covering vectors and just basic AP Physics 1, so your introductory stuff. So the first question, it says two vectors A and B have the same magnitude m, so we'll go ahead and write this out, A and B with mag m, and then they're vectors, but have the same magnitude m, but vector A points north. So we'll draw this vector A. Vector A points north, whereas vector B points east. Okay, and it wants to know what's the sum of A plus B. So to sum vectors, you do A y plus B y for the y value, so equals net y, and A x plus B x equals net x, and then use Pythagorean theorem to solve for the resultant. So resultant equals ny squared plus nx squared, where n's net or whatnot. So if we wanted to solve this for a and b, so we know that a will be the only y component vector and b will be the only x component vector, and since they have magnitude m, we can simply just define this as m. So m in the x direction and m in the y direction. So we know that ax, there's no by, ay, sorry, and there's no by, so ay equals ny equals m, and there's no ax because there's no x component of a pure vertical vector. So bx equals nx equals m. So thus the resultant equals the square root of m squared plus m squared equals the square root of 2m squared equals m squared of 2. And then as for direction, and since they both have the same magnitude, I know that it's going to be at a 45 degree, and one's pure vertical, one's horizontal, so this will be 45 degrees. Northeast is you could also classify it as northeast. Okay, so the second question is says both the x components and y components of our vector are doubled. So x and y are doubled. Okay. Which of the following describes what will happen to the resultant vector? Okay, so the x components, like let's say we have this vector has magnitude m. Okay, and m equals the square root of x squared plus y squared. So the x component will be m cosine of theta, and the y component, so equals x, the y component will be m sine of theta. So if these two values are doubled, you end up with 2m cosine of theta equals 2x, and 2m sine of theta equals 2y. So you end up with magnitude 2, so of the doubled version, equals the square root of 2x squared plus 2y squared, and then these both get squared, so you get 4x squared plus 4y squared, and you end up with 4 x squared plus y squared, and then you can factor, the square root of 4 is 2, so you end up with 2 square root of x squared plus y squared. So if we want to know by what factor it increases, so 2 over square root of x squared plus y squared equals m2 over m1. Call this m1. These cancel out, and that equals 2. So it doubles. If the x and y components both double, then the resultant vector as a whole has doubled. Okay. So we have our next question, and it says if a vector. Oh, it's okay. So before I go any further, I should probably explain what a vector is. A vector is essentially, a vector is a unit with both direction and magnitude. So like if I had 5, that's not a vector, that's called a scalar, so it's something with just magnitude. But if I did 5, 5, let's just say feet north, then it has magnitude and direction. So like 5 feet equals scalar equals vector. Okay, so that's the difference between a vector and a scalar, if you guys were wondering. And so like velocity is a vector because it's meters per second at direction. while speed is scalar because it's just, whatever, like just meters per second without any direction. Okay, so the next problem says if vectors v naught equals 15 meters per second, and this is north, and vector vf equals 5 meters per second south. It wants to know what vf minus v naught is. So anytime you're subtracting a vector, you flip its direction. So this north, so if we draw like a quick compass, north, east, south, west, north turns to south, and if we had like, let's say if this was east and like south to north for that sake, if we had east and we're subtracting east goes to west and west would go to east, so this north will turn into south, so you get 15 meters per second south plus 5 meters per second south, and the resultant is 20 meters per second south. Okay, so the next question says magnitude of vector A. So mag vector A equals 10. And it wants to know which of the following could be the components of A. So essentially 10 squared, so 100 will equal A squared plus B squared, or for that sake x squared plus y squared, because of Pythagorean theorem. So you have to have two numbers when they're squared. They add up to 100, and the most common ones are 6 and 8, because 6 squared equals 36 plus 64. So 36 plus 64 equals 100, and that's actually the one of the answer choices here. So the other ones like 5 and 5, you just end up with 25 plus 25. That's 50, not 100. 7 and 9, 49 plus 81. Once again, not 100. And then 10 and 10 obviously is not 100. 10 squared plus 10 squared, so 200. Okay, so the next question is. It says that A, oops, that was a really bad A. So A equals, and the vector looks like this, while B equals a vector that's kind of more at like a 45-degree angle, but is also smaller. Which of the following represents the direction of A minus B? Okay, so we know that vector B, a good way to flip it is just you draw the same vector, and then it's reverse, so like the head is at its prior tail or whatnot. But how you do vector addition is because this is essentially A plus negative B, so equals A plus negative B. So we just found what negative B is, which is that. So basically how you do vector addition is you draw one vector, and then from the head of that first vector you draw the tail of the next vector. So this next vector B would go like this. And then from the result of that, you connect the tail of your very first one to the head of the last, and that would be a resulting vector. So our resulting vector is looking somewhat like that, although in this particular situation, what do you call it? One moment. I'm just making sure because I don't actually have my answer for this one. I apologize. I just don't want to accidentally give an improper answer. So in this particular situation, I kind of drew them bad. So it would really be more like this. Because I was wondering, just based off my drawing, I was like, hey, that looks more vertical than horizontal. But it really ends up coming out to be like something like this. I just can't draw, but that's essentially how you do it. So like the head of B, B should really be more maybe like this. So you have A, your vector A, and then this would be your vector B, and then you connect them. And then it ends up being a purely horizontal line. That's how you do vector addition. Okay, so this one says if two non-zero vectors are added together and the resultant vector is 0, so A plus B equals 0, and A and B cannot equal 0. which of the following must be true of the two vectors? So if we just rearrange this equation, we get a equals negative b. And our possible choices are they have the same magnitude and are pointing in the same direction. We know that that one would be incorrect because if they're pointing in the same direction, then they can't equal 0. And our next choice is they have equal magnitudes and are pointed in opposite directions. And that would make sense because, if you have them in opposite directions, you have to subtract. Think about plus x or minus x, plus and minus, you end up subtracting. So that's actually the correct answer. And they can't have different magnitudes, which is another one of the answer, which the other two answers have. They can't have different magnitudes because we said that a equals negative b, and magnitude is just essentially, it doesn't count for the negative magnitude because the negative is really a direction. Magnitude would just be, whatever b is, like whatever coefficient b is. Okay, so that was the end of vectors, and hopefully this helped just get into gear with AP Physics 1, and then just going back on that last one, that really just was a result of my poor drawing. It really should have been drawn something like that-ish. I just can't draw or have good handwriting for that matter. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. I will be making some more videos tomorrow over some more topics in calculus and chemistry. So be sure, and AP Calculus BC and chemistry, AP Chem. So be sure to stay tuned for those. And yeah,